Hi, Mary. Thanks for getting back to me, and thanks for sending me your photographs of the work you've been doing. So delighted to see that you've been watching the videos and kind of having a go at some of these ideas and techniques that I'm putting out there. So what I'm gonna do is hopefully bring up your one of the pictures that you sent here with the watercolor rocks, and just have a look. What I really like about it at this point, two things actually. You're getting some lovely surfaces here um, on the rocks, and in the video, if you remember, I was talking about dab in marks and then take a clean brush, just tap, and it looks very much like you've been doing that in here, and the result you can see is this grainy surface, which is lovely, and then granity surface. Um, Possibly the lower rocks here, maybe some of this has maybe been, you've maybe tapped a little too much and maybe merged them slightly more than what you'd want. Sometimes with things like rocks and things that have a textured surface on the top of them, um, sometimes it's enough to put in a little clue for the viewer and not necessarily fill them, if that makes sense. If you look at this rock that I'm hopefully marking here with my little cursor here, what I'll do actually is I'll just take and draw a little line, so you see what I mean, it's around there. That in there, there's a lovely piece in that corner where you've dabbed the corner and faded it out. And then after that, you haven't really done too much, but the illusion's there for me, and I sort of make the assumption. Sometimes what happens when you work over the whole thing, you lose that gradation from smooth to rough that happens on rocks. So it may be that you could go back into these lower rocks and sponge them back, and then maybe reapply the paint and see how that goes on. And remember that it's all about experimentation. So let yourself experiment, and don't be precious about this particular image. It's an exercise, so it's yours to do what you want with, in a sense. One of the other things that might be quite kind of interesting now is, again, correctly, what you did was you observed the slabs, the facets of the rock. There were the shapes. Then you applied tone. So I can see you've got a dark tone, a middle tone, lighter tone. And the combination of those two things makes something that looks like a box, which is the basis of a rock of that type. So you've done all that. What might be interesting, if you remember in the video, you might even want to break so that the slabs aren't perfectly flat. Try and create, the fact that the edges might have a wee bit of ruggedness to them. So if you go along the edges of some of these slabs, some of these facets, what I'm doing is I'm going to use a sort of a dark gray just for this to see it. But first of all, if I was to take and just mark, I'm going to work in that rock again, this rock that we looked at a second ago. And if I was to take some of this gray darker paint, you see what I'm doing along the edge. I'm going up and down where the darkest edge meets the lighter top. You can see that hopefully that I'm squiggling the little digital brush I have here. Do you see up and down? Trying to get it fairly irregular. Um, and you see how that line suddenly, there's a new illusion starts to happen that the rock is in fact cut in a rugged way. So that might be something that you could actually do. Well, you could do to all of them, the little rock down here in the lower part while I'm at it, and just do that, you know, uh, to see what happens. You can see the little squiggles, I hope, there, and just how that adds to the illusion, if you know what I mean. And of course, the same applies. I'm just going to undo all this uh, to the beginning again, so you can see. So likewise, where you have a light area. So for instance, the rock that's down near the bottom here, if I take a light area, now I'm going to use a light gray, it might be a little bit lighter than the rest. But likewise, if that becomes slightly broken or slightly rugged on the edge, you know, and just tidy it a little bit more, you can also create that edge to the rock and so on. So suddenly it doesn't look, if you like a too perfect, which obviously we all know rocks will not be. So that's the second thing. The third thing is don't be afraid to actually bring some of the tones down. It can be very interesting, actually an experiment, and I'm going to do it here just to see if it works. I hope it works. But sometimes pulling the image together, what I mean by that is if we were to take, I'm taking what would be like a dilute gray. So if you're working in grays, dilute the paint down so it's really like a fairly thin, so it's transparent. You can see through it fairly clearly. And if you watch what I'm doing here, I'm going to put a wash. You see that there at the top, you can see, I'm going to get a big brush. You see there where I'm changing. So I'm actually changing that light area. I mean, you maybe haven't got to that point yet, but if you did that, and if you washed over, now I'm just using this to, you can see, you may notice that everything, I'm just washing across this with the gray. So everything in that picture, all the rocks that you've painted are being washed with gray. What I'm going to do is make a slightly darker wash. So again, starting from the top, you see that? I'm washing all the way down. And by doing that, I get rid of the extreme white or light and the extreme dark in a sense, and I create a middle tone. And then sometimes that gives it a more natural feel that, maybe it's not as extreme, but likewise, what you might then be interested to do is sponge away a little bit. So let's say that light rock in the top, you can see where I'm just lifting it slightly, where you see just on the edge there, you see how that's becoming lighter, that little tip there. I might even take the rock here towards our right hand side. You can see hopefully the little slab on the right of that rock catching a wee bit of light. And maybe the lights on the top of this one, I'll make a brush a bit thicker. You see a little bit of light maybe catching the top of that there. And then slowly maybe going down. You could blend that more, but you could first of all sponge it out and then just take a little bit of gray and just fade back into it so that you merge the two together so they're not sort of too sudden, if you like. But what that does is create little highlights on the rocks, which can be quite nice, So I think, play around with those 2 or 3 ideas, and indeed don't be afraid to play around with anything, to sponge bits out, try that texture exercise even more, and so on. I'm just undoing everything. You see now when I've undone that, how that image changed there from being more subdued. So have a think about all of those things, and we'll move on soon to the the next exercise, the next lesson, which I'll email you very, very shortly. So well done and good luck with continuing to work with this. Okay.